Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It's been a very busy but quite productive day for our investigative team. Today, investigators from the Recorders Group sat down with a Metro-North official familiar with the accident route and this territory and reviewed the data from the cab car. From that meeting, we've determined that the Metro-North Mechanical Department performed a proper brake test prior to the accident train leaving the station, and there were no anomalies noted. In addition, the crew conducted what's called a running air brake test shortly after leaving the station, and again, no anomalies were noted. We also looked at the data for each of the station stops along the route, and so saw no anomalies or degradation of the braking performance as the trip went along. Simply put, based on these data, there's no indication that the brake systems were not functioning properly. Also today, investigators began a more detailed inspection to each of the railroad cars and a locomotive. These cars were moved late yesterday to secure rail yards, and investigators spent the day documenting and inspecting the mechanical systems. In addition, we're continuing signal testing, and to date, no anomalies have been found. The operations group continued interviewing the members of the crew today, including the engineer whose interview is currently underway. In addition, they interviewed first responders to the accident scene. As required by federal regulation, following the accident, each member of the crew was drug and alcohol tested. The results from the alcohol breath tests were all negative. The results of the other tests are still pending. With regard to the engineer, he has worked for Metro-North for 15 years and has been an engineer for 10 of those years. This was his regularly scheduled route, making 2 round trips each day, with a typical day lasting approximately 9 hours. The engineer had been running this particular route full-time since November 17th. This was the second day of a 5-day work week. On the day of the accident, he reported to work at 5:04 a.m., was scheduled to leave at 5:54 a.m., and left on time. Now, many of you have asked about whether or not positive train control would have prevented this accident. What I can say is that for more than 20 years, the NTSB has recommended the implementation of PTC technology. Broadly speaking, we know that human error can't be eradicated and that PTC is capable of supplementing the human operation. These systems provide a safety redundancy by slowing or stopping a train that's not being operated in accordance with signals, speed limits, or other operating rules. PTC is proven technology that can prevent train-to-train collisions, overspeed derailments, and incursions into work zones. Since this is a derailment involving a high-speed train, it's possible that PTC could have prevented it. While this is our last on-scene media briefing, our work on this investigation is far from complete. Investigators will continue interviewing the crew and employees of Metro-North, and will interview passengers on the train and additional first responders as necessary. They will also complete some testing of the signal system and documentation and inspection of the rail cars and the locomotives. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to all the responders and officials from state and local New York government. At every turn, they've made our jobs easier, and we really appreciate their support. Finally, before I take some questions, I would like to set some ground rules. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and I'll call on you. I want to make sure that as many of you as possible have a chance to ask a question. I'd also ask that you identify yourselves and your outlet. With that, I'd be happy to take a few questions. Yes?
I'm Laurel Babcock from the Post. You can just comment on this scenario that's been outlined to us. It was our understanding that this train had a dead man's pedal. Is that correct?
Yes, they had the train had a dead man's pedal.
Had he taken his foot off that pedal, making the emergency system put the brakes into effect, then he tried to get control of the train with the throttle, and that's when the brakes were applied after that?
We don't know what that sequence was at this point. It's too early to comment on that. But yes, there was a dead man's pedal. Another question?
Can you tell us, Eddie, what you know about the driver's condition in the minutes and seconds before the crash? There's been plenty of reports out there that he was either just about asleep or zoned out or not realizing where he was.
So the question is, what was the driver's condition in the seconds before the crash?
Yes.
And the answer to that is we don't know at this moment. The interview was being conducted this afternoon, and it perhaps is finished by now. But as I mentioned earlier, we don't release the specifics of the interviews until all of the interviews are conducted.
Lou Young from WCBS TV. Could you tell us if the cell phone was in use before or any time during that run? You've had it, you said it was being analyzed. That should be fairly easy to indicate.
So the question was the cell phone being used at or before the accident time?
Right.
And the answer is we have not looked at that data yet. We're getting the forensic data from the cell phone. That certainly will be a focus of this investigation because we've had cell phone involvement in a number of previous accidents. But at this point in time, I can't tell you what the use was.
And to follow up, can you familiarize us with the length of time, how far back you go to retrace the movements that the driver had before the crash? How far back do you go?
How far back do we go to trace the driver?
Yeah.
We typically do a 72-hour history, which is 3 days. Yes.
You've said that he was on the second day of a 5-day shift. You said that he started at 5.
Your outlet? Name and outlet?
I'm very sorry, Nick Robertson, CNN. You said that he was on the second day of a 5-day shift, that he had started at 5 a.m. in the morning. What time did he finish the shift prior to starting at 5 a.m. in the morning?
I don't know the specific time he finished the shift, but the day was a typical 9-hour day, and these days were routine days.
So he would have had sufficient time to get a full night's sleep?
There's every indication that he would have had time to get full restorative sleep. That's correct. Yes.
Joe Brown with the Journal News. Is there any indication that any of the other crew members had concerns about the speed of the train before this, or any of the conditions on the train before the derailment? The
question is, are there any other crew members who had some concern about the speed of the train? And again, we're still interviewing the crew members. We haven't completed those interviews. We will certainly be asking questions along that line. Let's go to this side. Yes, sir.
Greg Mocker from WPIX TV here. It's my understanding that the previous stop before the incident was Terrytown. Is that right?
Previous stop was Terrytown. That's correct. It was about 14 miles.
So the train had been traveling for roughly maybe 20 minutes or so. What were the other crew members doing at that time? How many were there, and what would their responsibilities have been?
What were the other responsibilities? Who are the other crew members, and what are their responsibilities?
Conductors?
I'm not certain. My understanding was there was a assistant locomotive.
Conductor and 2 assistant conductors.
There was a conductor.
3 assistant conductors.
3 assistant conductors. Okay.
Would they have had some responsibility to monitor, or would they have contact with the engineer during the course of the performance of their duties?
Well, let me call on Mike Flanagan, who's the investigator in charge, to answer the specifics of that.
Well, in the passenger operation, the conductor and assistant conductors tend to the passengers' needs, pick up the tickets, make sure they're all right. The conductor does have some responsibility for the safe operation of the train, but the conductor is not necessarily monitoring the engineer and the performance of the train on a moment-by-moment basis.
Is that something that you may recommend?
I'll let you talk about recommendations.
Well,
An area that you're looking at?
we will. You know, this whole investigative process ends with safety recommendations, and we look at all of the areas where we think recommendations would, if implemented, improve the safety. So we will certainly consider that in the course of deciding what recommendations to put forward. Yes?
Curtis Skinner from Reuters. Do you have any more information you can share about the engineer's work history as an engineer?
At this point, the question is, do we have more information about the work history? And the answer to that question is simply, we are gathering that kind of information at the present time. In the back.
Alex Silverman, WCBS Radio. It's been reported that there was some sort of audible alarm that went off in the cab shortly before the accident. Can you comment on what that alarm was, if such an alarm existed, and what conditions would have triggered it?
So was there an alarm that went off prior to the accident? The answer is I am unaware of that. And again, it's early in the investigation process, but we will certainly be looking at signaling systems, alarm systems, warning systems.
You're not aware of the specific system that train had on board that would have triggered an alarm at some point?
I'm not aware of a particular alarm at this point. Way in the back.
Lydia Serrani with Fox 5 News. Say the conductor had a medical emergency. Is there some sort of backup person, backup plan that would go into effect to prevent this from happening? Because a lot of people didn't realize that this all rests on just the shoulders of one person.
So you asked if there was a backup conductor or backup engineer?
A backup conductor, like a second person, like a co-pilot, a backup engineer, like you would have a co-pilot on a plane, or is there some sort of technological system in place that would prevent this from happening? Say if the engineer was having a medical emergency, is there some way that somebody could jump in and stop this from happening? So
the question is there some way that this can be operated with basically a second operator? The cab car is designed for operation by a single person, but there are other systems like the dead man switch, like an alerter switch, which have been put in there to assure that there is an operator paying attention. Yes?
Ida Siegel from WNBC, talking about the dead man switch. Can you explain exactly where it was located in this locomotive and how it was supposed to work versus what actually might have happened in this instance?
So the question is, how is the dead man switch configured? Where is it located?
Yes.
The train was being operated from the cab car with the locomotive pushing. The dead man switch is in the cab car for the left foot, and basically the operator is either sitting or standing holding his foot down on that. If he releases that, then the train goes into service braking.
What do you think happened in this instance, or do you know?
It's too early to tell exactly what happened at this point.
Pete Donahue from the New York Daily News. Have you tested that dead man switch? Has it been found to have been operable? Was that not yet checked?
Well, the question is, has the dead man switch been checked? And the answer is the cars are being inspected now. So certainly that will be one of the things looked at. But again, the cars have just been moved as of 1 day ago into a secure location. Go back here.
Michael Herzenberg, New York One. What's the timeline for releasing the information that you've garnered from the engineer about the interview?
What's the timeline for releasing information about the interview of the engineer? All of the interviews have to be completed before we release any information on any one of them. And that just depends on how fast we can get people, what access we have to them. So it often takes some time.
A follow-up to that, the engineer, has he retained a lawyer, and is that impacting your questioning of him?
Has the engineer retained a lawyer? And the answer is, I'm not aware of that. It's possible he may have. The interview process is well developed and quite structured. We've been doing this for quite a while. The interviewee is allowed to have one person join him. In many cases, that may be somebody from the union. It could be an attorney. but they're limited to one single person.
And in his case?
In his case, I don't know. That has gone on basically as we speak.
Was that gentleman?
Yes.
Lisa Evers from Fox 5. From the physical evidence that you've been able to look at this point, was the engineer fully conscious at all times prior to the derailment?
Was the engineer fully conscious at all times? It's premature to be able to say yes, he was or wasn't. Again, that's what the investigation hopes to determine.
Member Weener, please, one more.
One more?
Based on what you said so far about the systems and the brakes, everything seems to have been working as it's supposed to be. Are you leaning now that this was more because of human error than mechanical?
Are we leaning more towards human error versus mechanical? Frankly, we walk into an investigation like this and open up all of the possibilities. And then one by one, we try to say, this one is not likely, this one's not likely, and see what we're left with.
So is there anything you've preliminarily eliminated?
One in the back.
Following up on the question about an alarm, you said that you weren't aware of a speed alarm going off on this train. Are such alarms common on Metro North trains?
Are such alarms, a speed alarm, common?
That's something I don't think we've determined at this point. There may be a number of different systems that alarm, either part of the signal system or the mechanical equipment. It's something we'll look at, but you know, I'm not in a position to say, you know, chapter and verse which alarms might or might not occur.
Thank you very much.